In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment through the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. Geshe Chekawa, who was the master who a few generations after Atisha structured and publicized this text. He compiled the teachings of Atisha in 7 points. It's said that during his teachings, the mind is full of defects, but it has one big quality. That is, what you teach the mind follows. This brings us to the fact that we're made of habits, and we have so many habits. Our way of thinking, our way of reacting or acting is made up of habits which we've developed dependent on the education that we have, our social context in which we are brought up, the imprints that we bring from our experiences and knowledge in the past, in this life and other lives. There are so many aspects together that make us think how we do think and be as we are. And as I said yesterday, but we do have a level of freedom, a choice in all this. And it's in the small actions, everyday actions, that we can gradually mold our being. And that's where we train ourselves, because the path is divided into 3. In Tibetan, Tesam Gonsum, which would be to listen, understand, and meditate. And as an end result, to realize this listening is where we acquire information. Therefore, it's a moment in which we are still learning. We don't have our own direct experience. We don't have direct experience, but we're listening. We conclude the phase of listening when we have the certainty of that which we have heard, listened to, but we don't understand it very well. One of the verses that we read yesterday, for example, reveal your own failings and don't look for faults in others. We talked about this yesterday. We can arrive at the conclusion that, well, okay, it seems a good idea. I shouldn't be afraid to show my defects, my errors. Remembering that we haven't said entirely, but it's very important. To admit openly your own errors doesn't mean that you've eliminated them. And it's not a punishment either towards ourselves. It's the beginning of the process of change. Because sometimes we make mistakes. And then we ask, we apologize. Look how bad I've been. I did this and the other. And we suffer for the error we made. And we, deep down, we believe because we suffer that the error we made, we've eliminated the error by suffering. I don't know if that's clear. When it's useless that I suffer. It's got nothing to do with eliminating the error. If I suffer, it doesn't mean that I've eliminated that behavior. What I have to do is to direct myself towards the correct behavior. That's what I have to do, not suffer. Therefore, reveal your own failings and don't look for the faults in others. We heard this yesterday. Okay, so at a certain point you say, okay, seems right. When we get to this conclusion, this seems the correct behavior. We've concluded the part of listening. And from this we have to embark on a process of understanding. Understanding requires analysis to talk about it, look for defects, pick holes in it, look at it from every angle, because we have, with that conclusion, we should believe it not because somebody told us, but rather because it has to be it has to be our own internal certainty. It must arrive. It must become our own understanding. If we use technical terminology, what happens is that the first step is listening. Then you develop the wisdom of wisdom, when you've had a presupposition, a correct presupposition, which is in Tibetan is called yiche, which describes which is the certainty of something, which is not based on no logical understanding or direct experience. Therefore, what happens is when we have the certainty of something, but we don't have our own complete logical understanding, we've accomplished the wisdom of listening, but then we have to go on to the wisdom of understanding, which so we have to develop here a valid referential cognition when we have the certainty of something based on correct logical process. Conceptually, I understand this. So therefore we have to do the whole analysis, talk about it, put it into, test it until we arrive at our own certainty. We're not just repeating something said, but it's our own knowledge. When we get to that stage, we have realized the wisdom of understanding. This is true for any subject. And somebody said, you say, wow, that's already something. But I'm sorry to say that's just the beginning. Because the longest part is the third part, which is called familiarization. Translated often as meditation, but I don't think that's I don't particularly like that translation, because the term meditation it gives us an idea of reflecting on something, on the meaning. Meditate on this. It gives the idea of reflect on the meaning of something. And in recent times when we say meditation, the idea is to empty the mind. It's come to mean this. The third step, gom in Tibetan, literally means familiarization. To get used to something. The fact is, I understand that. I understand. First of all, so I have to familiar myself here with my own failings and not look for faults in others. I have to familiarize myself with this so that it becomes spontaneous in the end. It's the longest part, the most important part, that which is called the familiarization, in which we have understood it becomes part of our world vision, but it's not yet a habit. We must make it habit. And we have to go into the process of inducing ourselves into that behavior, inducing ourselves into that state, that physical, mental and verbal behavior for countless times until it becomes a habit and it becomes naturally spontaneous. This is the process of listening, understanding and meditation, of familiarization. And this we must remember, that this is valid for any subject on impermanence, awareness of death, of the preciousness of this life, of the correct relationship with the spiritual God, on everything. Even a diet that we undertake. Let's imagine that we want to go on diet. Have you ever tried to go on diet and then not succeeded in keeping it up? Well, you don't have to put your hand up. I already know the answer. I imagine I imagine that most of you in these modern times have tried it. How do we apply this when we go on diet? First of all, I read the diet, I go to the dietologist, a friend, or who knows who, and he tells me to do this, that, and the other. You shouldn't eat this. You need to eat this, that, the other. Stand upside down when you eat, God knows what. And then one listens, and it seems okay. But before I start, I have to understand. I go, I study, I try to understand that why the diet is because of this, what's the problem with the weight at night, problems with weight now. Why does this is a benefit and the other not? Until I have such a strong conviction that the diet is good for me, then I can go ahead. So it's not just somebody told me to do it, and I say, okay, I'll try. It becomes my internal certainty. It's not just because somebody told me. And then begins the process of following this. Okay, I want to eat this. I have an urge to eat something I like, but I stop myself. I control myself. The first weeks are very difficult. Slowly, it becomes easier and easier until I get to the point when I don't have to follow the diet. That diet becomes my habit and my lifestyle. And it's not even tiring. It becomes natural for me. This is an example. That's an example of following the 3 steps. And this is valid for so many things because we are made up of habits. We're not made up of knowledge. In other words, we're in the sense that our actions and our behavior is not conditioned by our knowledge, but prevalently by our habits. Therefore, the objective is not to understand so many things. The objective is to change our habits. Once a friend said to me, Lama, when you speak to people like me, it's not enough to say what we shouldn't do. I'm a person who I've tried every drug imaginable. I've done so many things, had so many experiences. If somebody says to me, you shouldn't take this, it's bad for you, it doesn't help at all because we know it. What we need is that somebody gives us alternative way to put our energy, when we have something else that we like, where we find joy, naturally we're happy to put the energy there and not in the harmful habit. This made me reflect so much. We have different habits which are not good for us, but the path is not to go against our habits, but to create good habits, which automatically counteract the bad habits. Is that clear? Therefore, our mind has so many defects, but it does have a great quality. That which you teach it, it follows. You have to remember that every day we are teaching ourselves something. With every choice we make, with every behavior that we have, every meeting, every reading, any thought, we are teaching ourselves something. We are directing our being, our mind in a certain direction rather than another. As we said yesterday morning, it's our choice if we want to grow, live with, and transform ourselves as a result of circumstances in which we live in, or do we want to transform ourselves in an aware manner towards a chosen direction? This is what I want. And I hope that all of you do that, therefore. We have the fortune to have these texts. Fortune doesn't regard just to physically have a text, which is already a big thing, but we have access to these words through a long lineage, which means that these words have a power. All right, let's go back to the text. Proclaim your failings, but do not look for faults in others. Hide any good quality you may have while declaring others' virtues. Let go of concerns for gain or respect, and always renounce the desire for fame. And with few wants, remain contented, and repay any kindness you receive. Let go of concerns of gain or respect. What does that mean, gain or respect? In Tibetan it's very specific. In Tibetan it means when we do something with the objective to obtain something material in return, this is nyepa, which is gain. When we do something with the objective to obtain services, respect, etc. from others, this is kurti. Therefore, it says our actions towards others mustn't be guided, propelled by the desire to have something from the other, but from the desire to offer something. The other day, I was reading this book of Seneca, and it said, friendship is very important, but if you look for friendship to obtain something for yourself, it's the beginning of the end of the friendship. The beauty of friendship is to give, not to receive. It's the friendship in itself. I'm your friend because you You give me this, that, and the other, and I gain some benefit from being your friend. That already is contaminated, contaminates the friendship. Therefore, Atisha reminds us when we do something, especially for other people, let's try and remember why we're doing it. Let's try to observe our motivation. And let's try to act for the well-being of the other and the well-being of everybody. And not as a kind of business. I give you this and you give me that. I behave like this because you're going to do this for me. It's obvious. When we, for example, we find ourselves in the world of work, the moment in which we make okay, obviously in business, in the economic situation a company produces to receive something. That's, for example, somebody has a profession, there's an exchange, a natural exchange. Obviously that's different. At the center, for example, I've been trying for so many years to introduce with a certain mentality, but it's very difficult. But I'm not giving up. Let me just take advantage to make this parenthesis. We live in a material reality. We have to eat. We have to use the resources, material resources. And this reality, material reality, it's made on the basis of exchange. For thousands of years. Today we have money, but it's always been on the basis of an exchange. And what has been developed together with the masters, there's always been people. There have always been people who have rendered materially possible the context, their teachings. There have been, principally in history, there were kings. They weren't really big businessmen. Principally, there were kings who had the resources, who rendered possible to create big meetings, to support all the activities connected with giving the teachings. For in Tibet, for centuries, every time there were teachings, there were people or the person who requested the teachings and covered the cost of the teachings, food for all the people present, the offer to the person who was teaching, and all the connected costs. When Lama Ganchen arrived in the West, he gave in the beginning of the 80s, he started to teach in Greece. He dedicated himself principally to healing. And they asked Rinpoche, well, how much will it cost? He was shocked. He said, what do you mean? It doesn't cost anything. It's free. And he saw that effectively in our culture, we give value to something on the basis of the price, but at the same time, if it doesn't cost much, it's difficult for us to give it value. For example, I have never paid anything for teaching I've received, but I never received a teaching without giving an offer from my part to my masters in India, in Tibet, wherever it was. And so my desire, my wish would be here at the center and the other places where Dharma is developing in the West, that there shouldn't be such cost and Dharma, a direct relationship, because that way you're attributing a value. We don't even have a value to attribute to the teaching. So how can, if I should choose to a value to attribute to the teachings of Atisha, I wouldn't even know how to attribute a value. In Tibet, there were cases, there were in the case of Milarepa, he came to, he offered everything he had to his master, and he arrived with everything. The master looked at him and said, "You didn't bring everything." He said, "Well, actually, you're right. There's a sick goat that I left at home." Because everything means everything. But it's not a question of the value. It's the question that one attributes to the teachings. And that my wish that here there isn't the necessity to attribute a cost, that everybody offers what they can within their possibility. What do we need? We have to pay electricity, taxes, heating, to cover all the costs connected with this activity. It's not that this center, when the bill arrives from the electricity comes, we can't say, "Okay, we've prayed for you. We don't need to pay." This doesn't happen. Therefore, as some people ask me, how much should I offer? The how much to offer is that which is neither little or a lot, or too much, within our possibilities, which we feel to be right. My vision, let's say a bit naive, people tell me, would be that everybody offers what they can on the basis, and on the basis of this it should work. This is my wish, this is my vision. Even if in our culture it's very much easier to say how much it costs, it's the easiest thing to do for everybody. But I believe it's not the best way to develop these teachings and Dharma. This is really what happens, is that when we give teachings, there's not an aspect of exchange. I don't give you the teachings, Dharma, because I want something from you. I shouldn't do that. I must give Dharma because I want to offer the best to the people who receive. And that's one of the things which was, and this was very much emphasized. I've seen things which left me feeling, broke my heart in pieces. Not here in our other places, maybe connected with us. For example, I saw somebody who goes to teach, who went to teach, where there's a price to pay, and in teachings, and starts the teachings by counting all the people present, how much money he receives. And on this basis, he chose where to teach, on the basis of how much money he could earn. The problem with this is that it's contaminated from the beginning. It's like what we were saying about friendships. The purity, the necessary purity is lost. This is very dangerous in many ways. I know. It's interesting that in our society there are a few things which are very, very present, but at the same time there are strong taboos. One of them is money, and the other is sex. It's interesting in the Tibetan culture, money's not taboo, another sex, and there are two things. But nobody talks about it, but it's certainly not taboo in Tibetan society. We have these two things. It's not the subject for today, but it's the importance for us to exchange, in which each of us offers the best that they can to the other for the joy of being able to offer, not like a personal exchange. I don't know if that's clear. The more we can do this, the better it is. I see in little things, other things. Recently, I had, I was concerned very much, busy with all the, um, all the workers on the construction of the temple. Apart, obviously, apart from the professional capacity and the cost of this person, one of the characteristics for me is that who comes to work it wants to offer his or her best, apart from the value, the commercial value, because it totally changes the dynamics. Well, okay, it's obvious that the other has to exist. There's an exchange, but offering the very best that you can. That was a condition for people who came to work here on the temple. Atisha says here, Atisha says, and let go of concerns for gain or respect. Let go of this habit of doing something for material return or for your image, services, respect, or whatever. And we look in our everyday life with our relationship in the family, with friends, with other people. How often do we do something or say something because that way we get something from the other, a compliment, whatever it is. It happens, no? It's normal. The problem is that when we react with expectation to have something in return, and what happens usually is it's not that we expect patience or joy. We usually expect something from the other, material benefits, recognition of image, sensorial pleasures. What happens is that when we react in this way, we naturally reinforce the illusion that these aspects brings us happiness. Because we continually take refuge in material things, recognition, sensual pleasures. We project our happiness on these things. And it's one of the big cons. We screw ourselves. Every time I react with the reason, because I want to have something in return, I reinforce this illusion. And I contaminate the motivation for the action. This is something which is especially Atisha emphasized in the religious context, because if I have to sell potatoes, I sell a potato because I want to buy a cart or who knows what. But when I have to pray, give advice, share dharma, etc., there should be no this attitude of exchange. And it's something which is very prevalent in our society. Many times they invited me to talk. This happens mainly in companies or in conferences. And the question is, how much does your speech cost? I always replied, it doesn't cost. If you want, you can make a donation to the center. That's very welcome. I come because I think it's necessary to go. That's all. And very often, I've seen people are very uneasy about this. But really, you have to tell me I have to give you. No, I won't give you. You do what you want, what you feel like doing. Because that's not the relationship that I want. Therefore, simply, we should be careful to maintain a relationship where we offer for the benefit of being able to offer, for the joy of being able to share, to give, which is a wonderful thing. And when we interact with other people in our daily life, we do what we do, thinking for the benefit of all the people around us, what's best for them, not because if I do this, I get that. Okay? I think it's clear now. And I'm just make an aside. I really hope that in this center we manage to achieve this objective. I'm pushing in this direction with so much resistance. No, it won't work. How are we going to pay the bills? You know, who's going to pay the bills at the end of the month? Okay, I have to take care of the bills at the end of the month, but at the end of the month, when we have 4,000 euros on the account, it's a big, huge thing. We just about break even at the end of the month. But we're always there with water, with our nose just above the water. This is very different, separate from the projects or undertaking like the temple. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do it. We use the funds. We use all the funds we get for the realization of the temple, and which remember is for the benefit of all of us, not just one or two people. But I really hope that we manage evermore to have this exchange, because the center isn't mine. It's not. It's everybody's. So everybody should take care of the center according to their own capacities and resources. This is my wish. I'm very perseverant. I persevere. I'm sure sooner or later we'll get there. I don't give up. Let's go on. Let go of concerns for gain and respect means let go to gain something or respect from others, and always renounce the desire for fame, the desire for fame to be recognized, the desire to be famous, recognized, which is really strong inside of us. How many times we find ourselves in... How often do we suffer because people don't recognize what we've done? Why, are you happy with what you did? Yes, well then why are you worrying? There's this strong wish to be recognized. Once I had a personal experience in which I was in a monastery in India. There was an exam in debating. I was the first debating exam that I participated in. I studied a lot. I prepared a lot. It wasn't easy. And in my class there were 70 people. Let's say 7 lamas, of which I was one. I was obviously the only Westerner. And we did the exam. At the end of the exam, the results are given. And there's a great ceremony. 1,500 people present, and then the names are read out. Of the marks that people achieved in the exam. The top marks, the people who got the top marks were called, and there was a prize giving and the kata. And I was there and I was going towards the puja. Somebody I know who was part of the committee, he said, I think you're going to have a surprise today. And I said, oh no, come on. But inside of me, I began to feel a bit proud. Then I was there. At a certain point, they call and start calling from the 5th place. 5th, 4th. Okay, for heaven's sake, I'm not going to win anything. Instead, I was the 3rd, or 2nd, if I remember correctly. And I went up to receive my prize, and there's something which is horrible, I find horrible, a together of pride. Look at me, look how great I am. But a manifestation of humility. So you put the two things together, you feel proud. Oh, how great I am. But you don't show it. You act as if you're really humble. That is really horrible. I go there, I receive the prize, the kata, and I sit down. I don't want to know anything. I sit there quietly. But on one side, we're in a culture where there's a kind of internal double game that you have with humility and pride. And I come home, and there was a kind of joy. Wow, look how great I am. And there was Genlapala, the master with whom I lived, who looked after me like a father. I can't go into his room. I sat down. And he goes, ciao. I get the book that which they gave me as a present, with certificate and the cat, and I put it on the table in front of him. He doesn't say anything. I tried to change the subject, see if I could provoke him into saying something, and he doesn't say anything. And the more he didn't bring up the subject, he didn't say how great you've been. He's never criticized me. He's always supported me. But in that moment, he's nothing. He just simply continued to treat me as he's always done. There was no change in his behavior towards me. He had giving me no recognition for being a good student in debating at the beginning. It hurt a bit. I said, how come? Everybody said brava, and you tell me, and you don't say anything to me. Slowly. Because he didn't manifest any aversion or towards me or disapproval. He just continued to behave as he always did. And this allowed me to gradually to calm this state, this inner state, and to see it was an illusion, to relax myself, and to see that. And things were going on as before. It was just an illusion. And that was okay. It's just a sign that I'm studying well, that's all. That doesn't change anything. That reminds me of a disciple of Lama Michel in Brazil, an actress. When she met him, she'd just become very famous. At the beginning of the 90s, internet hadn't come out yet, and social media. So the main media was the television, public television. And she was on a telenovela, a soap opera. From one day to the other, and soap opera, she became very, very famous and recognized. It was the absolute top of her career, recognized everywhere, etc. In the beginning of this, while this was happening, she lost her hair. She got alopecia. She lost all her hair. And Lama Michel was in Brazil. She went to Lama Michel in Brazil to ask for help as a healer. And he looked at her. And she told me this story afterwards. What happens? He asked her, I'm an actress. Things are going very well at the moment, but the problem is I'm losing all my hair. Looked at her and said, you have become famous, and now that you're famous, your hair's falling out. And he started laughing. He laughed in her face, like really couldn't stop laughing at the idea. She didn't know what to do. Now that you're famous, you're losing all your hair. She didn't know how to react. She said, okay. He gave her the cream pills, water pills, and the cream to put it on her head. What Rinpoche made her understand, as she described, was that fame is not in itself, is in the others. What determines fame is not the characteristics of the person, but how the others see you. There's so many actors, great actors, who, if I'm a great actor and I'm not recognized, it depends on other people, not me. When she understood the encounter, the meeting with Lama Ganchen, she understood that fame, it wasn't hers, that she is famous. It was something that others attribute to her. It's in the others. And she relaxed. And gradually, and then she got better and all her hair came back. Once she told this story, she told this story in television, and everybody started calling, we want these pills, how can we get these pills? When she told me this phrase, when she said the fame is not in he who is famous, but rather the person who recognizes that person, this will to desire to be famous is an absolute illusion, because the fact that a person sees me in a certain way, it doesn't mean that I am in that way. The fact that somebody tells me you're great or you're terrible, it's got nothing to do with my qualities. Later we'll see in these teachings of Lojong, we'll see the 10 jewels inside of Kadampa. One of them refers to the fact that it doesn't matter if someone says you are God on earth, or somebody says that you are the devil on earth. Doesn't make you neither a devil or a God. So don't have attraction to those who call you God, and don't have aversion to those who call you a devil. Because that doesn't mean that, doesn't make you become that. Even if it were like this, even if it is like this, we still base our identity on how others see us, and not on how we experience our own being, ourselves. This is really strong, because deep down, why do we look for recognition? Because we have identity based, which is prevalently based on what other people think of us. Very often, to see ourselves, we try to see how other people see us. And even our physical aspect. Is it important that I feel good inside myself, or how others see me? What's more important? That it's important that other people think I'm well or look good. Therefore, at the base of all this, to not look for fame is the basis for developing an identity or self-esteem, which is based on our real inner qualities and behavior, not on what other people say about us. This really requires thorough training. We're so used to, since childhood, to look for approval. If you look to see when a child does something good, we all say, look at him, isn't he good? Well, they teach us to do this. And then when he doesn't receive, oh, you're great. If he does something, then he's hurt. He's upset. How many people I know who are 50, 60 and 70, and they still suffer for the lack of approval and recognition from their parents rather than other friends or other members of the family. I don't want to get into the details, but it's very important to cultivate an identity and as a consequence our self-esteem, which doesn't depend on what other people say about us. It doesn't depend on what other people think. One of the ways of doing this is to not look in our actions to obtain approval in other people, but to act according to what we feel is the best for other people, not to obtain a result or some kind of specific recognition. Okay, I think it's clear now. Therefore, so abandon the desire to obtain material things and respect. Respect means people who come to you, who serve us, and who stand up when we walk in, who treat us with a certain importance. Because there's another subject. The more I need respect from others, the weaker, the more fragile is my happiness. Let me give you an example. I'm an important person with a recognition. What happens is that I'm used to where I find myself. I arrive where I usually go, and everybody serves me. What happens when I go somewhere where this doesn't happen? You don't feel at your ease. There's something that's not right here. And they're little things that cause this. For example, places where we sit down. Lama Michel says to me, see how selfishness works. Somebody sits down in a chair, and what happens to that chair? It's my chair. It's not the chair where I'm sitting down. It's my chair. And I had this experience the first time. I was between 12 and 13 years. And it was a period in which there was this ceremony of, I don't know if it's to say, enthroning ceremony, when a young lama is recognized. And for the first time it's recognized, and there's a ceremony within the temple, the monastery, of recognition. And personally, I always experienced this as a huge weight on my shoulders, and I was very uneasy about this because I found myself, they put me on a big throne. Together there were all the abbots of the monastery, the elders, teachers, Lama Ganshin. Everybody was much lower than me, and I was just very small. I thought, what am I doing here? But there was an unease to find me there. What I find to help me to transform this sensation. Okay, I overcame this by realizing that they were giving me a responsibility. There were a few of these ceremonies in different places, in 3 monasteries. We go to the smallest department where I lived, where there was in the morning a ceremony like this. In the evening there was the dinner. Okay, there wasn't the dining room. There were so many of us and guests. We ate in the gompa. Then I go there and I had the food ready, and I thought, well, where am I going to sit now? That was a big problem for me. What is my place? My place is where I sat before, is that right? So my first thought was to sit back on the throne. And they start to prepare everything, and I thought, at a certain point, what am I doing? It's not out of respect for me and how I am, but it's out of respect for my role and for Dharma. And that time was so important. I took my food, I just sat on the floor with the others, and I ate very happily on the floor. But what I realized then was that it's very easy for us to fall into the trap of needing recognition, the attachment to approval from others, which is something which is very creepy, insidious, but it contaminates our actions right from the beginning. Therefore, we need to protect ourselves from this. We need to protect ourselves. We need to protect ourselves from our own weaknesses. Therefore, I share these experiences, these my personal experiences, because I'm not going to give other people's examples of other people's lives. It's natural for me to use my own examples, but it's something that we should look at. Each person should look in their own context, and it's very important that we give respect to others. But at the same time, we shouldn't need to be respected in return. We should recognize others, but we should not expect to be recognized for our qualities. Because our joy, our stability, our identity, our self-esteem should not depend on that which others think of us or do with regards to ourselves. When I talk about this protection, let me just conclude this with an anecdote of one of my masters who's still alive. My main philosophy teacher in the monastery in Serra, he was one of the most important masters that existed at the time. Let's say there were 4,000 students, and he was one of the most important. He was the teachers of the lamas, etc., and he never wanted a title, abbot or whatever, official title, but every time His Holiness the Dalai Lama came, the Dalai Lama called him personally to come and sit near him, to talk, etc. When the Dalai Lama came to talk, and there were teachings, there were so many people. Let's say 5,000-6,000 people. In the Gompa there were 3,000, in the Tibetan way, that is. Wow, people sitting on top of each other. In the Western way there would be 2,000. And with COVID, let's say 500. It was a big place. The Dalai Lama called him to sit near him. There was a kind of dais where there was the throne. There were the abbots and the most important 10. And they put a place specially there for him. And he never went there. He used to sit outside amongst all the lay people, right next to the speaker. And I asked him, well, Gemma, why don't you go and sit there? You can see the Dalai Lama, you know him, it's much nicer. And, it's a detail, when they bring the tea, it's still hot. He said, the higher you are, the harder you fall when you fall. I don't go to the teachings to see where I'm sitting. What do the other people think about me? Where am I sitting? Look at me. I'm sitting here because Lama called me to sit here because I'm special. He said, I know my weaknesses. That's why I'm sitting right outside. I'm here to connect myself with the teachings, not the recognition. And this was a great lesson for me. And when we went together to receive other teachings, I woke up so early to get a place right near the teachings, in a comfortable place. And he made such fun of me. Therefore, what happens is that We have our weaknesses, everyone, naturally. But we must protect ourselves from our own weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses is the necessity to of fame, of recognition, approval, principally when we do something virtuous. We shouldn't look for recognition when we do virtuous actions. Therefore, because to go to feel good, if I meditate well, I don't go and say, I meditate well, so I feel like a great meditator. If I manage to understand something which I didn't understand before, I don't go around to project the image as being somebody who knows this. It doesn't matter if people know that I know this or not. It's the important thing is that I know it and understand. But these are little things, but very present. I think that's clear now. Therefore, we have to be very attentive. The Bodhisattva vows, however, there's a part which says, if you have the possibility to have wealth, fame, and power, you should not refuse it. Why? If I have the intention really to be of benefit to others, can I help people better being poor or rich? Rich. If I really want to help others, really, how can I influence people being well known or being totally unknown? Being known. Therefore, how can I help others? A bit of power or influence, or having no power at all? Having influence and power. When you manage not to depend on these things, to project the happiness on this, then you use these things as a means. The problem is when they become an end, not a means, for one's own recognition and identity. Is that clear? In itself, it's not something bad, but it depends how it's used. Is that clear? The fact that we have fame, recognition, and money should not change us in a state of balance, satisfaction and peace, and our own identity. That's the point. Very important. But in order to be able to not depend on this and to be able to use these things, we should first be able. We need to be able not to depend on these things. We need to be effectively to abandon, and we should be careful not to have that double game, as the Italians say, a double mind. Well, me, I don't need this. I don't need recognition. But one of the keys in our path is total honesty with ourselves and others. Is that clear? Let's go ahead. Having, with few wants, remain contented and repay any kindness you receive. Having few desires and being satisfied. It's really two things which are very important. To have very many desires means I always want new things. Or the bicycle. If I've got the bicycle, I want the motorbike. If I've got the car, I want the boat. If I've got the boat, I want the airplane. Dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction is, if I've got the bike, I want a new bike. If I've got a car, I want another model. When we have so many desires, it means that I'm not happy with what I've got. I just want more and more. The dissatisfaction is the state of not being satisfied with what I have, and I need something more to be happy. To have few desires is very important, but it's born from our capacity to not project our happiness on that which really can't sustain it. Therefore, it's important when we decide something, to ask ourselves, why do I want it? The value that I attribute to that object is, can it be sustained by the object or not? It's very often our desire is based on an illusion that that object can give us a state of happiness, which really deep down we know is not true. Therefore, we ask ourselves, why do I want that? Really, why do I want it? To have few desires. There's another important aspect, which brings a lot more satisfaction, in inverted commas, to tame our desires. It's much more satisfying than to have the desires. The desire is like the ring. It's like the ring in buffalo in his nose. Because however strong, or the bull, however strong he is, the ring in his nose manages to make him go wherever we pull the ring. We can have so much knowledge, we can have so much strength, determination, capabilities of any type, but when we become slave to our desires, we're totally screwed. We lose our capacity of discernment, of choosing. We effectively lose our liberty. I remember once, the first time I used this it was a metaphor. A person said, I have so much money. I have fame. I can do whatever I want. I can do things well, but I'm slave to my desires. I cannot reason with this. There was a particular situation going on. What happens is that we have to live from very simple beginning. What do I want? And what do I need? And to know to distinguish between desire and need. I need, okay, I need to satisfy. I want, it's not so important. If it's there, it's okay. If it's not there, okay too. We mustn't give importance and value to I want or I don't want. Because the following I want or I don't want, it creates incredible suffering. So many times I see people who are well, but they suffer because things are not as they want, or although as they don't want. And what happens is it causes suffering. It's not the situation itself. It doesn't correspond to people's desires. And it's an example, which I've made many times, of a monkey with the cucumber and the grapes. The more I desire something, the less value I give to that which I have already. We become total slaves to this. Therefore, one of the strongest points is to be able to distinguish when I'm attracted to something or I desire something. Do I want it or do I need it? When we see that we don't really need it, then they shouldn't be priorities. Oh, if they're great. If not, that's okay too. And to be satisfied gives value to that which we have already. To give value to the context in which we find ourselves now, to our body, the resources, material resources that we have, the people that we have around us in this moment. Because dissatisfaction is from means not giving enough importance to that which we have already. And it's a bit of an illness, really. The more we complain, the more dissatisfied we are, the more dissatisfied we become. Because if dissatisfaction were a kind of a hole which filled up, that would be okay. But the interesting thing is that the stronger my desires, the stronger my dissatisfaction is. The result of having the object of desire would be satisfaction. Actually, it's not. It's dissatisfaction. Because deep down, when we want something, what we want is the sensation of pleasure. And after a while, that sensation is not there anymore. We have to project it on another object of desire. Therefore, what I invite you to do is, first of all, is to make a distinguish between I want it or I need it. And when we see that we want something so much, but we don't need it, we need to, it's not bad or evil, but we don't want to be slave to that. Therefore, we leave it apart for a while. We need to, how can I say, not follow desire slavishly. If something's there, great. If it's not, that's still okay. To give less value to I want. It reminds me, once I was in the airport of Linate, I was going to Holland. And at a certain point, there was a family next to me. And there was a child who started to cry and have a tantrum, as if he was being tortured. I observed the situation. I'm generally curious. I like observing things around me. And I saw what was happening was that the child, the mother had taken some potato chips for the baby, for the child. At a certain point, the child opened the bag and gave it to the child. And the child started screaming and had a tantrum. And the mother said, didn't understand why. What's wrong with you? Why are you crying? And the child said, I wanted to open the bag myself and you did it. And the mother said, and metaphorically speaking, knelt to the child, sorry, I really didn't know you wanted to open the bag. And I said, oh, poor child. Oh, poor mother, but also poor child. Because what's the message which is given to the child? If you wanted it, I didn't know you wanted it. That's the message. This was something very important in my education in India when my Galapo and my other masters, Galapo with whom I grew up, when I asked him, I want this, he would say, well, and therefore, and so what? But if I said something I really need, if I really need this, he gave his complete attention to me. Wasn't important. He just say, so what? This is good for us. Because the more we want, the less we have. And let's remember, satisfaction is not a result of obtaining many things. Satisfaction is having less and feeling satisfied with what we have. Therefore, we shouldn't be satisfied. We shouldn't be satisfied with internal qualities, but develop them ever more. We should give value to what there is and the world around us. But our happiness doesn't depend on one thing or the other. The only way to do this at the beginning is to not to be slave to our desires. I think that's clear, no? Is it easy or difficult? If we ask ourselves, what do we say? What do you think? Easy? It's difficult. Certainly. Certainly. It's always been. But because it's difficult, that is why it's practiced, it's remembered to reinforce that. And there's another point that's added to this, that is, when we find ourselves, when we face the objects that we possess, material things, let's ask ourselves to these questions, to these objects, sorry. Are you at my service, or I am at your service, to the objects that we own, that we possess? If I possess something, it's important that that something has a function for me. If that something has no function for me, well, hell, well, there's no reason to possess it. Try. Go home. Go in to look at your drawers in the wardrobe and look at what's inside. What function does this have or that have for me? It could remind us of something nice that we could get. It could protect us from cold. It could help us to feel good, whatever it is. But when we look at something and the only function it has is that we possess it, and where I actually serve the object and the object doesn't serve me, there are three possibilities. Or you give it away, or you sell it, or you throw it away. Yeah, if possible, it's better to recycle. But don't keep stuff accumulated just to possess it. This is really heavy. Okay. And repay kindness, any kindness you receive. When something does something nice to you, when we receive something from others, it's important to be able to offer them something, to repay the act of kindness, and to give value and to show our gratitude. And it's something nice, not to take something for granted, but from our part too, to give something to the person who's given us something. And let's remember here, there's another subject. There is the generosity of knowing how to give, but there's also the generosity of knowing how to receive. Sometimes people want to give us stuff, and we don't want to receive. But if I receive, oh no, I have to give this. But it's important to be able to receive. Let's go ahead. Cultivate loving kindness and compassion, and make your bodhichitta stable. Cultivating love. Gom Chashing in Tibetan, Gom, which is the same that we use for meditation. It means familiarize yourself, cultivate. Therefore, in our daily life, we must try to familiarize ourselves with love and with compassion, to the best of our abilities, to include in our daily life and actions, to give importance to the happiness and well-being of others, which actually doesn't happen spontaneously to us. Because to cultivate means to energy into something which does not happen spontaneously. One exercise which I started to do when I was in Beijing. After 3 months in Tibet, I took the plane from Shigatse Lhasa, and I'd been closed in my bedroom for a long time, so I just went to my master and came back. saw very few people. And when I went to the airport and the whole journey until I got to the hotel, I saw so many people and I wanted to hug all of them. They were all Chinese, but they just seemed they all looked the same. And there was an affection, an attraction to them, something very particular, love and the desire to hug everyone. And I remember in the hotel, and I had such an inner joy. It was very particular, very special. And I said to myself, I don't want to lose this. And I created my own exercise, which was to go around people whom we'll meet in our daily life. Not the same people every day, preferably. People we don't have so much familiarity with. If I go to the restaurant, at work, wherever it may be, every time we meet somebody, if a few people, if you only see the same people, that's fine. To look at the other person and inside say to ourselves, I wish you to be happy. Your happiness is as important to you as it is to me. We don't have to verbalize it because you'll create havoc if you verbalize it. You don't have to say to the waiter, I love you. No, that won't work. But internally, we can say it. We see the person. We allow ourselves to say, well, good morning. How are you? For example, I try to apply this always. In lunch break, there was a fact, received a strange phone call. There was a very enthusiastic girl. What I try to do in these cases, somebody I didn't know, to think of the person at the other end of the phone. Because the attitude we have normally is to, sorry to say this, usually we're very selfish. Yeah, I'm eating, it's not the right moment. Oh, why are you disturbing me? Or we put the phone down on the person. And the person at the other end of the phone, how do they feel? Therefore, an act of kindness, talk with affection towards the other person. Once I did this, I gave an example, disciple in Brazil. She tried to do her training where it was a period in which she had to call centers. There's certain situations in Brazil that were famous, were practically impossible. For example, if you wanted to have a contract with Sky, the equivalent of Sky, if you didn't want to actually conclude the contract with this Sky-like service, it was practically impossible. She was there, but the training she did, the call center called her, and she put a mirror in front of us. Sorry, it was difficult to conclude. It was difficult to conclude the contract. So she was in a call center. She called many people. So when she saw from her face that she was losing patience, she put the phone down and started again with a better attitude. It was a kind of training. Beyond all this, so these situations where it became famous in the poor service of call centers in Brazil, became famous in Brazil. So what I'm talking about is adopting a kind attitude to everybody we interact with, the respect towards others, others who are in inverted commas invisible to us. To thank them. To manage to see the other and desire that the other person be happy. But it's something we can train ourselves to do in our daily life. Trying to effectively go towards the other allow ourselves to see the other, and internally to say, I love you and your happiness is important to me. I have compassion in, and your suffering is important to me. I wish you not to suffer beyond our own needs, our desires. Therefore, this is an easy exercise, but it works quite well. You try and do it according to your the possibilities. When it says to cultivate, it's translated as kindness, loving kindness. It's love in this sense means being attracted to the happiness of the other, not simply having an attraction towards the other, but rather to their happiness. And compassion is doesn't mean suffering for the suffering of others, but it means the desire that the other doesn't suffer. It's different. And make your bodhichitta stable, and make your desire to stable your own qualities, to be of benefit to others. Make that stable. One of the most important aspects of when we talk about bodhicitta, which is called the mind of enlightenment, is the trust we have in ourselves. There are two kinds of bodhicitta. One, it's called the first would be translated as the bodhicitta, which is like the taste of the bark of cane sugar cane. I don't know if have you ever eaten cane sugar directly? What happens usually, if you haven't got a knife, what happens to you with your teeth? You take the outside off and you bite it. The outside, the bark, is sweet, but not as much as the inside. Unlike other fruits, where the outside has a horrible taste and the inside is sweeter. So bodhicitta is like the taste of cane sugar. It's the state of bodhicitta. It's not real bodhicitta, but it's similar. It's the moment in which the person desires so much the happiness of others and has unconditional love towards others, but doesn't have full trust in himself to be able to develop his or her own qualities, to become a Buddha, to be able to help others. So he has compassion and love towards others, but not enough trust in him or herself. So bodhicitta requires trust in yourself, this act of wanting to develop your own qualities. I can do it. And this is one of the most important parts of when we have separated, cultivate loving kindness and make your bodhicitta stable. It means cultivating our self-esteem, cultivating our trust, faith in our qualities and being able to do it. I believe that I react correctly if I do my best, if I follow the path. I can develop my qualities and I will be able to help others. And this is one of the... And really this is what I find people have most difficulty with. I see people, it's easier, because it's not always like this, but generally people have less resistance to developing love and compassion, to faith in oneself, one's own ability. And it reminds me of Lama Ganchen, who sometimes used to say, how can I expect of you to have faith in me If you haven't got faith in yourself, how can I expect this? How can somebody have faith? So if somebody doesn't have faith in themselves, how can they have faith in somebody else? It reminds me, once I was in Tibet and they asked me to give teachings on the three aspects of the path in a monastery in Newagyachik, a small monastery near Lhasa. And talking to the monks, what I realized was that from my point of view, most of them were, but many of us and a lot of them, it's not that they didn't have faith in the teachings, in Dharma, etc. But what was missing was faith and trusting in themselves. What is missing is the believing, I can do it. We're there, we pray, we ask for blessings, and we expect something to happen one day, but to have the faith that I can do it, and I want it, and to decide really as the priority in my life to reach the so-called state of Buddhahood requires a very high level of self-esteem and faith in oneself, the faith that we have in Buddha and Sangha and Dharma and Guru. We need the same faith in ourselves. This is this is a point that we need to cultivate when it says, teacher said, stabilize your bodhichitta mind. It means this, in my opinion. Means if the Buddha Buddhas in the past, and they were in a similar situation to me, well, I can also do it if I follow the same path. I can get there. It doesn't mean feeling superior to others, but it means having faith in yourself, trusting yourself, in your capabilities. This is I'm kind of lost for words here, because we live in a context where there's a strong sense of guilt, which brings us a kind of lack of trust and faith in ourselves. We have a tendency to approach spirituality in which the concept of taking refuge is saying, I'll put myself in your hands, when the real concept is, show me the path so that I can do it myself. A patient, the doctor, the main thing is for the patient to have faith in the studies that have been shown of people who have, there was one study in which they studied people who were cured of their illnesses, the study of many people who cured from the same sicknesses, but who had received different therapies, alternative and standard. And the result was to discover what aspect the people who were cured had in common. And the only thing that they had in common, the people who were cured, was the conviction that the treatment that they received was the correct treatment from them. That was the only thing they had in common. It's the faith that I can do it is absolutely fundamental when we want to be cured of a sickness, and that also applies to our spiritual path. The point is that the only reason for which Buddha taught what he taught, for which all the masters transmitted, and that they arrived and they reached us, the only reason for which Lama Ganshin did everything he did, the only reason that I, in my small way, try and share all this knowledge is because Buddha believed that we can actually do it. Lama Ganshin had faith in us. I have faith in you. I say really sincerely, honestly, if I didn't think you were if I thought really you weren't capable of putting practice what I'm saying, I wouldn't be here at all. I would rather go for a walk, a nice quiet walk in the mountains, which I love doing. I honestly prefer silence to talking. But I can see something which is a benefit to me, the importance of sharing this and the importance for all of us of, it's not a teaching, it's not like an extra analytical meditation, but the basis is the faith I have in you. I honestly believe that all of you can do it. It doesn't mean you'll do it immediately, but everyone, we have the capability to put in practice, to transform ourselves. So we're not just here to share knowledge. It reminds me of a friend of ours. He had a very difficult childhood. His adolescence was even worse. And he found himself, he became a drug dealer in his adolescence. And then he became a burglar, burgled houses. And one day he had a gun pointed at him in the middle of the traffic. And he asked himself, what am I doing? And then found himself somehow in a positive thinking course. And he started studying this, did the course. He completely changed his way of living, and shortly afterwards he became a teacher himself of positive thinking, and then he became Buddhist, etc. But in his development, and he used to say, if I can do it, you can certainly do it. We can all do it. We can all really, really change behavior, generate qualities. I haven't met anybody at all who wasn't capable of loving. I've never known anybody who putting action, energy in a certain direction couldn't develop patience, love, balance, peace, etc. If you have faith in the Buddhas and your masters, they have faith in us, so we should also have faith in ourselves. That's why when I have a deep faith in you, all of you, it's not an expectation that you all suddenly pop up as Buddhas. But I have the certainty that each one of you, putting yourself in the right direction, following the path, which is gradual, let's not forget, can make these changes and transform him or herself. That's why it's really important to have this faith in ourselves, this good self-esteem. And I want to develop internally, I want to develop my qualities to help other people and to cultivate this in our daily life. Let's go to the next verse. Avoid the 10 unwholesome actions and let your faith be forever strong. Here, the most very simple point is that, but not at all easy, that which we recognize as being negative, which are harmful, body, speech and mind, are to be avoided. And that which we recognize to be positive are to be cultivated. It's as easy as that. The 10 negative actions, there are 10 actions which Buddha described in a very generalized way, when great, there might be some exception, but generally they're negative. The 10 are the 3 actions of the mind, 4 of speech, and the 3 of the mind. Those of the body are killing, take life from other beings in general, taking that which isn't given to us, i.e. stealing, taking possession of something that wasn't given to us, something we don't have the right to have, and to have an incorrect sexual conduct. Let's start with the first one, to kill, killing. The actions, the negative actions, which come mainly from an intention, an emotion to hurt the other, and in the interaction creates suffering. Those are the negative actions. To kill is an action which creates suffering in the other and for those around. So it's something that should be avoided. And for this, there's a difference between not killing because you don't need, and not killing because you have the awareness that it's bad to kill. Let's look at the most common example, a banal example, like the mosquito. Why do we kill mosquitoes? Because they're bothersome. They're annoying. Can you see the level of selfishness that there is in this? I'm taking away your life because you're annoying me. Is that clear? It's said that about 9,000 years ago, human beings lived with they had an animist vision of the world, which was based on the human beings were part of nature, and an animal was just as important as a human being. There wasn't a difference between different beings. We're all in the same level. Then, 9,000 years ago, with the beginning of the era of agriculture, when human beings started to cultivate the earth and to have to use animals to cultivate the earth, and they started to raise animals, this created a certain violence towards animals. And what happens in a kind of natural way is that we're not favorable towards violence deep down. It's natural to a human being and all forms of life. It's not to approve of violence, but how do we justify violence? Creating distance between us and those who suffer violence and putting ourselves in a superior position. Why is it okay that some people in some way and have to put up with certain conditions and others not? Because there's an attitude of superiority. So we live justifying things. the sense of superiority justifies violence. And what happened in past times was, in order to justify violence towards animals, there was another action of the vision of the world where the human beings are the center of the universe. I'm superior to you. Therefore, your suffering, what's it in front of mine? So the bother, the annoyance of it to a human being is much more important than the life of a mosquito. I'm going to kill you because you're annoying me. Put in these terms, I don't know if you feel it, if it's heavy for you as it is for me. In Tibet, there were who said, it's killing karma. In Tibet, they said it's not bad karma killing mosquitoes because they don't suffer, because they don't leave blood. But it's not the point if it's negative or positive karma. Let's go beyond that. Taking the life of the other is an action which, in my view, generates suffering and therefore should be avoided. But once I found myself in Brazil. I was in a boat with a friend who took me around Búzios. And at a certain time, we're in front of a hidden bay, a speech. This is the place where they bought slaves. And when slavery was abolished in Brazil in 1889, for many years afterwards, they illegally brought and sold slaves in this beach. And while I was there, it came to me this thought, wow, the people at the time who had owned slaves, were they bad, horrible people? Or was it just so normal that they didn't even think about it? And when I said this, somebody said to me, it's like today, we raise animals and we kill animals thinking that it's normal. A few years ago, some countries, the first was New Zealand, inserted in their constitution the emotional rights of animals, that animals have emotion, and that they have needs, emotional needs, which is not enough just to eat and a place to sleep. They have an emotional, affective need. What I want to say is that we very often, with an attitude of superiority, we justify our own violence, generating suffering for us and others. Therefore, we need to, well, I'm going to leave you all to think about this. I'm going to leave you all to reflect on this. But therefore we feel superior to nature, and so we exploit it to animals. We feel superior to animals, and so we exploit them. But I believe, what's the first thing that Buddha said? He said, don't kill. And I believe in all religions this exists. But he didn't say don't kill human beings. Or he didn't say don't kill good human beings. Or don't kill the human beings that you like. It's don't kill. At the base of this is the respect towards the other. Your life is worth as much as mine. Your life is important. It's something in the Buddhist teachings which is very clear. When a person dies, the mental continuum, the gross mind dissolves, and then the subtle mind, then what remains is the very subtle mind, which continues from one life to another. And this can be reborn in countless ways. A human being can be reborn as a mosquito, and a mosquito as a human being. What happens is then the main difference between a human being and an insect or an animal, from the point of the mind, is the body which determines the form of the mind. But we're made of the same thing. Therefore, it's really important. We make the prayer, can all beings have happiness in its courses? We should add, each one of them individually have happiness in its causes, and to cultivate this, respecting each and every being, and to the point of not killing any of them. And let's remember that each of the 10 negative actions is divided into 3, multiplied by 3. Don't kill, don't make somebody else kill, and don't rejoice for the killing. I won't kill. No, it's he who's killing. And rejoice in the killing. It said that in a war, a soldier who kills 10 people, he has. The general who gave the order, however, has the weight on his shoulders of all those who were killed. Therefore, let's start from this point. It's something which is very important. And there are some aspects which are priorities in life's life, and one is respect to the other and towards life. And if this is a priority, all the rest comes after. And there's no but. It's annoying me. Okay, so that's it. So you're annoyed. The mosquito's annoying you, so what? Okay, mosquito seems like a stupid being. But if you could see how many times in so many different contexts people said, oh, okay, all beings, but the mosquito, I'm sorry, no. It doesn't let me sleep. Well, and you don't let him live, so what's the difference? But it's only a mosquito. What do we know? What do we know how a mosquito lives his life? What his internal experiences are? What do we know? I mean, I'm saying this really. We are trapped in our vision of the world, of reality, so we think that our perception is the reality. The way in which the mosquito lives is in a reality? I have no idea. It's not that there's no suffering. Therefore, the principle of respect to the other is the basis. Let's start with the commitment not to kill and the respect to the other and not to steal. Don't take that which hasn't been given to us freely. Very simply. And the third physical negative action is not to have an incorrect sexual conduct. There are various ways of interpreting this. What happens is that let me simplify this. The sexual act is something which has a power and a very strong influence and power in life. It's not something banal. If we look at if we look at the tantric teachings, what happens is that the gross mind dissolves, and then when you contact, and in a brief moment, you have contact at a very deep level. You have, if I allow myself, if I enter in, if I enter this very deep mental state, the deepest mental state with a sense of attachment, I create so much damage. If I enter with aggression, I develop aggression. I develop attachment if I enter this intimate state. So it depends how you enter this very deep mental state. If it's love, you cultivate love. But it's a kind of energy that must be used with respect. All you have to do is to look in our society how many conflicts happen, the problems that and the suffering that exists with the not with the of using of the non-healthy way of using our sexual energy. How much suffering is caused? It's one of the key points of this third negative action. Is once it was described as the definition of the word lust. In the Christian tradition, lust is a sin. The definition of lust, etymologically, the lack of respect for the dignity of one's own object of desire, or the lack of consideration for the dignity of one's own object of desire. In other words, I want to, without taking into consideration your needs and your desires and your wishes, your sentiments. Because I want you, because I want you. Therefore, it starts from a very, very, very selfish motivation, where the other is not taken into consideration at all. Because in various contexts it's described that sexual energy, which if it's used, which can elevate us, if not it can throw us down. But if it's something which is used with a base of selfishness, it makes us fall, throws us down. In many traditions, they say avoid it. It's better to avoid it because it's a minefield. So like so many things, it's not something that's negative in itself, but how it's used. One of the points of departures, a few days ago somebody asked me, well, in my way of being, monogamy is something that doesn't exist. It can't exist. What's the problem with that? First thing, if I make a commitment to somebody and I break this commitment, I'm actually breaking the commitment with myself. Here we go beyond the fact of the physical act. We're talking about if I want to establish a relationship with somebody, which is very important for all of us to have trusting relationships, where there's trust, where there's affection. At the base, what is there? It's respect and faith and trust. And the interesting thing is that once a commitment is broken, even if the other doesn't know, it creates karma. There's something, it's said that when we take a vow, a commitment, there's something physical, it arises in us, an energy. When we break that commitment, that too is broken. That if I want to have a trusting a loving relationship with somebody, it's important, it's better that it's pure. Therefore, it depends a lot on the commitment that we have and to maintain a relationship of transparency and respect from both sides. Therefore, to avoid incorrect social conduct is principally, we're not in a monastery here, but principally to avoid a sexual conduct which is based on, prevalently on your own selfishness and the act of taking and not exchanging and not giving. It's the conduct which you shouldn't hide yourself from, because you should be consistent with your own commitments. I don't know if that's clear. Therefore, it's not for no reason that from the times of Buddha, one of the negative actions is incorrect sexual conduct, not because sex itself is a sin or it's something bad, but because it's an action that, if it's used incorrectly, can create so much conflict and suffering. What is the most arms that's used, most common, is rape. This it shows you the power of that action, of this act. On the one hand, it can be wonderful, and it could be an action of terrible destruction. It should be treated with respect. Also, because when it's treated with some triviality, you lose respect towards yourself. I don't want to go into detail of this, but it's something that it's strongly connected with desire. And here there's a little problem in modern times in which we live in, is that the nature of desire is the more I want, the more I have, the more I want. And if we want to maintain a bit of pleasure with something, if I said on another occasion, this is a mundane consideration. This is not Dharma, this is like life advice. If there's something that we like and we feel good when we have it, we should have a relationship with it of seduction and conquest. When something is accessible at any moment, any time, it loses value. Is that right? Just have a look at panettone, Italian cake for Christmas. If it were here every day, it would be different. This is important. If there's something is precious for us, which we like, it makes us feel good. I'm talking on a mundane level here, not on a spiritual level. We must have to keep that relationship of seduction and conquest. There has to be this relationship on both parts because this maintains the pleasure. And what in part I see has happened, that this aspect of conquest and seduction has been lost in the sexual act, in which everything's okay, everything's at any time, anywhere, losing a little bit the value that's attributed. And this brings consequences without going into details. Therefore, it's something that should be done with giving value and with respect. And possibly each one of us in your lives and your relationships, try to have relationships where There's a physical exchange, sure, but it's an exchange. It's a giving and it's taking. Where this is united with affection and love and respect. This is something I believe to be very important. We have the three negative actions of the body: killing, stealing, and incorrect sexual conduct. And then we have the three of speech, the four of speech. Zumba means to lie, to try to convince the other with words to have a different version of reality that we hold. Not to say that ours is the correct vision, but we try to convince the other that see reality in a way which is different from the way we view reality. One of the great problems with lying is that when I create the habit of lying, I end up lying to myself. And people who lie a lot can't help but lying to himself too. And the person, the liar, has difficulty discerning the truth from untruths. So avoid lying. And it's said that of all the lies, the worst one is that of, for example, in monastic vows, you lose the vows. When you lose the vows, a human being, you shouldn't kill anybody, but in lies, one shouldn't lie in general, but you lose the vows when you lie in a certain way, which is when lies to others, trying to show inequalities that he doesn't possess. One shows more compassion than he has, wants to show off realization that he or she doesn't possess. And the fact of losing, of stealing. So there are many, with regards to stealing, the votes are annulled when the object stolen has more value, has more value for the thief than for the person who possesses, or vice versa. Sorry, I'm not sure. That which hurts us and hurts others, ourselves and hurts others. Lama Ganchen said there are some things that are not secret and they're not public. We shouldn't lie, but that doesn't mean that necessarily we continue. Doesn't mean we should always say everything to everybody. What I've seen in Western culture in these days, it means a secret is something which happens to hide something ugly. I'm going to keep this secret because it's not nice. I don't want other people to know it. In Buddhist tradition, Tibetan, very often there's the concept of secret is there to protect something that's good, not bad. There are certain things which they're said and explained to he or she who's not ready, who's not qualified, can see this in a very wrong way, harming himself. And therefore, in these situations, the secret is maintained. Our concept of not lying, don't try to manipulate others to have a version of the truth which is different from our own. A vision of reality, which is different from ours. Karma is to talk unnecessarily. No, I'm sorry. Trama. Sorry, I made a mistake. Trama is divisive words to create division between people. using words, even if somebody says the truth, but says something to one and to another in order to create conflict between them. Tsiksup is using harsh words, ksik words, to use violent words, to have an aggressive way of speaking. And nakyal is to talk unnecessarily, in vain, like chatting for nothing, chit-chatting, talking for talking's sake. But why is it negative, talking, chatting, talking for talking's sake? When we talk for no reason, what are the subjects? Rejoicing for the qualities of others, talking about the correct view of reality, trying to understand how to develop generosity, or do we talk about prevalently about of objects of attraction and aversion? Usually it's criticism, and often they're things which cultivate in us sentiments which are not virtuous. Because speech has that incredible capacity to direct our mind. So don't say what's not necessary. And it's a problem which has existed since the time of Buddha. Otherwise it wouldn't be amongst these 10 negative actions of talking in vain. With speech you can create so many conflicts, and we condition our own way of thinking through our speech. Be careful not to speak in vain, to criticize people and gossip, etc. Then we have the 3 actions of the mind. Napsam, Nisam, Lotak. Napsam is desiring that which we can't have. What happens when we want something that we can't have? We try and find a way of getting it using incorrect ways often. Let's say we're entrapped in that desire to have something which we don't have the means to obtain, where to obtain that we have to generate suffering to others. One of the examples of this is when, if something is possessed by another, it's useful for me, the only way for me to have it is to take it away from the other, and I shouldn't take it away from the other, and I shouldn't desire that which I can't have. The worst of all these, of the 10, is the next one, Nisim. No means create damage to, or to wish suffering in others, to want to damage others. It's the mind that desires, that rejoices in the suffering of others. Well, we say, well, that's not me, I'm a good person. Well, I remember as a child at school, and every now and again somebody did something something was not nice enough, and you would hear, serves him right, serves her right. Yeah, it's okay. Serves that person right. I don't know if you've ever said that, serves him or her right. Why? Why does it serve him or her right? Why? When there's a politician, personality, when something bad happens to that person, what do we say? There's a kind of inner joy. Are we joking? Are we kidding? When we talk about not rejoicing in not rejoicing in the suffering of others, the other means anybody or any other. So starting with the people near us and to those we interact with. And here we said yesterday, it's important to distinguish between the actions from the person, the behavior from the person. I can be against a certain kind of action or behavior, but that doesn't justify rejoicing in the suffering of the other. I can strongly desire that that person doesn't behave in that way, but not that he or she suffers. Is that clear? Therefore, separating the action from the person. From the 10 negative aspects, the worst is, according to my understanding, is to rejoice and to desire the suffering of the other. And this happens in tiny ways when you argue with another person, when you act in a way that hurts the others and wanting the suffering of the other, even if only momentarily. When the other hits the other physically, verbally, also mentally, the basis of this, what is there? Wanting the other to suffer. And it's one of the worst attitudes that we can have. It should be avoided at all cost. And the last, which is called lotak, it's a bit harder to understand, are the visions, the erroneous visions. What are they? States of mind which bring world visions, world ways of perceiving reality, which brings us to a negative component which creates suffering. For example, one of these visions, there's no relationship between my actions and the result. I can do whatever I want. As long as nobody gets me, discovers me, it's all okay. There's so many erroneous ways of seeing things. For example, that violence is a violence. Violence is a means of acquiring my own happiness. That's the wrong view. And it's quite generalized. There are many forms of wrong view. There are 64 of them which are described. The wrong view, the deepest one, is a grasping to inherent existence, in that inherent existence, that things exist in their inherent autonomous way. And grasping at this is the most serious of the wrong views. When Atisha says, avoid the 10 negative actions, the wrong views, they're the most difficult to limit, but either you have them or you don't. But then it implies a gradual process to acquire the correct view of reality. But with the others, it's very possible to be mindful. Let me just be precise about one thing. It's said that if a being acts with love and compassion and wisdom, there are certain cases in which killing is not a negative action, where stealing is not a negative action, where lying is not a negative action. It's said that the first 7 of the body and of speech, if they're done with a state of unconditional love and compassion and an awareness of correct view of reality, can actually be positive. It's said that For example, a previous life of Buddha, he was on a ship. There were 300 people aboard, and one of these was about to poison all the others. And the only way that he found to save all the others was to kill this person. But there was no time was the intention to hurt that person. And there was no hatred towards the person who was trying to poison the others. He was also seeing the damage he was doing to himself, not only others. And the term which is used, the negative karma that he would have generated for himself. He couldn't persuade him to do otherwise. The only way to stop him was to kill him, but with an attitude of compassion towards him and also the others. But it has to be real. It can't be, you can't. That's why the 10 actions are to be avoided. There are some personalities in history, people who I've known, who had this capacity. I have actually known them when we, in different, or some historical personalities managed to, in certain situations, it was of more benefit to react. And so when for a bodhisattva said, who has already reached a certain level, who has a correct view of reality, has a level of loving compassion which transcends his own selfishness, that uses the means which is of greater benefit in that particular moment. If he doesn't have a state of loving compassion to this level, unconditional, if it's and doesn't have a consistent correct vision of reality, these 10 actions are totally to be avoided. Is that clear? The 3 of the mind, for whomever, it can be a bodhisattva, that there are no excuses for whomever. Therefore, this brings us to a very point, the relativity of things. It's not the action in itself, it's the interdependence which creates the suffering when the action in a certain way creates and which avoids suffering or brings benefit in the long term, then it's okay. It's explained that the important thing with regards to an action is in the medium and long term, does it bring benefit? An action in the near term is negative, but in the medium and long term brings benefit, is taken. But an action which brings in the immediate future brings benefit, but in the medium long term brings suffering, should be avoided. But you need a purity in the action and a certain wisdom, and which is not for everybody, at least not us. So let's just be careful. Everybody with himself. I'm saying this otherwise. Yes, but how with a bodhichitta, a lie is okay. It's not that simple. You need a deep level of awareness of love, unconditional love. Okay. Let's avoid the 10 unwholesome actions and let your faith be forever strong. Cultivate your certainty, your faith in the path, in that which avoid that which causes suffering, and keep doing things which create benefit. It's as simple as that. It's not reinforcing faith like a mystical faith, a blind faith. Faith means believing in the existence and the characteristics and the potential of one's things. In my opinion, reinforce your faith in that which brings benefit, which should be cultivated in the conduct and vision, and should be cultivated and which brings benefit. Overcome all anger and conceit and be humble. Anger, aggression is to be avoided because it creates damage. I don't need to say much here. How can we avoid anger and aggression? First step is to stop justifying it. It's crazy. But one is not only angry, but then goes on to justify this aggressive behavior. Is that true? It's true that I got angry, but yeah, look what he did to me. Yeah, but if he hadn't said this, and if this one hadn't done this, I'm not getting angry because I like getting angry, because I got angry because of what happened. So one not only reacts without respect, with a lack of respect, causing damage to oneself and others with anger, does it also victimizing himself. And then we say we're all there in the head. And we say we're not crazy. Why? Well, it seems such a ridiculous absurdity that not only do I cause harm, but I see myself as a victim at the same time. Therefore, let's be careful, attentive. The first thing to do is to not to justify. You get angry, yeah. Why? Because there's a habit. The aggressive behaviors, yeah, because you get agitated, anxious, certain mental states, whatever. But the first thing is to please stop justifying our aggressive behavior. Because the more we justify it, the more they are reinforced. But we need a balance. Not justifying it means I mustn't start adopting a sense of guilt. Because we said at the beginning, I behaved badly, I shouldn't have done this, so therefore I put myself of having to suffer, a kind of self-punishment for having behaved in a wrong way. And that's enough to be okay. No, it doesn't work like that. Don't justify that behavior, and I direct myself towards a better behavior with affection towards ourselves. But we're not babies anymore, not kids. Life's going on, passing quickly. Do we want to die as an anxious person? How do we want to get older? A boring old person. There's a term in Portuguese. What happens is, the more you get older, habits become stronger and stronger, become more solid. If you have the habit to respond badly to people, the stronger it gets within yourself. Let's ask ourselves, if I have a long life, how do I want to be in my old age? Do I want to be kind, polite, who's it's a pleasure to be with, or do I want to be somebody who's always angry and complaining, etc.? Because what we do today is what we're constructing for our future. Therefore, we don't have time to waste. I want to get angry. Yeah, sure. What do? We recognize that there is, if we let that energy, we recognize that energy, and we let it flow. We don't direct it to anybody, and we recognize that it's a habit that we have. It's better to put your head in the cushion and scream, but don't go against somebody. I've seen so many times another, more extreme. I've seen people put their head in the water and scream. But I want to say that recognizing ourselves that when we interact with others with aggression, we ourselves are damaged. We hurt ourselves. Once it happened to me some years ago, somebody who's no longer with us, who died, he was near me, and he had the habit of driving and swearing. So he learned all the. So I learned all the swear words in Italian just by being next to him, and he reacted with such aggressiveness, and it was quite heavy to be in the car with him. One day I said to him, "But why? Sorry, why? Don't say these swear words. You relax. What? But I don't. I've got nothing against you. But they're doing harm to us." He couldn't understand that. Sorry, I said that you're doing yourself harm. He couldn't see this. Oh, there were no emails. Write a fax. He write a fax with all the swear words. All right, every time he says words, I asked him, let's write all a fax of all. Let's write a fax with lots of swear words and send it to the office and say, well, it's not for you. And then I managed to stop him doing it. And I asked him for explanations of each swear words. When you react with aggressivity towards somebody, even if it's not directed to the person next to you, do you harm the person next to you? Yes. And that damage, that hurt, and increases with time like a wound that grows inside you. And this wound is somehow contaminates the affection and the friendship that exists. And it's tiring because somebody is aggressive, and at a certain point it's gone, and everything should be how it was. When the person was the object of this anger, has to elaborate the aggression received. When the other behaves with aggression, we must try not to connect with the aggressivity of the other. It's a manifestation of that person's suffering, and it's a cry for help, for suffering, but we mustn't connect with it. The point is, from our point of view, we must avoid as much as possible to act with aggression, physically, verbal, or mentally. And when we see that it happens, don't justify it. Don't victimize yourself. That's the first thing. That's it. Where are we? It's translated. Overcome all anger and conceit. It's like squashing from the Tibetan. Dominate. Overcome. Win. And this is number 6. And arrogance, conceit, sense of superiority in front of other people. I love the word of arrogance in Tibetan. Na means I. Gyal means victorious king. I king. I victorious. It's the sense of superiority with regards to others. This has to absolutely to be avoided. When we relate to others with if we put ourselves in a superior position to others, we inevitably see ourselves in a lower, inferior position with others. To overcome this arrogance, what should be done deep down is the development of an identity which doesn't depend on comparison with others. We're not there to try and see who's better or worse. I myself, you are you, everybody with their own problems, I'm not worse or better also because and I don't, any of us have the real capacity to be able to judge what's going on in the mind of the other, who we really have in front of us. Therefore, hey, slow down, take it easy. Don't judge. Don't be superior towards other. And adopt an attitude of humility. Be humble. Humility is not feeling inferior to others, but not comparing ourselves to others, and as a consequence, not to have a superior position. To be humble doesn't mean I have to be worse than another. It means I don't have to compare myself to you to see my own worth. It's a humble status. I respect everyone. It means I'm open to each and every one. And there's not a sense of superiority or inferiority. Okay? And there are characteristics which are very important, qualities which are very important. And as we saw yesterday, this advice that Atisha gives us is easy to understand, but not easy to put into practice, and very powerful when put into practice. But that's why they were secret for so long. This morning, I read this quickly where it said, don't talk about this to non-humans. There are all the characteristics that Atisha said who could be taught. Okay, when I read this morning, I thought, okay, let's go home. There's nobody with these characteristics. When we'll see this verse, we'll look at it in more detail. We're not at that level yet, but at least, very least, have the intention to put into practice, the very least. Even if we aren't at the correct level. If people say if you're a Buddhist, you shouldn't get angry. I've heard this. What the answer is, person is getting angry because he is a Buddhist. Because he was a Buddha, he wouldn't need to be a Buddhist. One is a Buddhist is because he's on the path of growth. Because he's getting angry, because he has just because he has these defilements like anger and fear, that he undertakes this path. But it means doesn't mean we don't have these dynamics anymore. Being a Buddhist doesn't mean a Buddha. A Buddha doesn't need Buddhism. It means having honesty in wanting to develop our qualities. This advice that we receive, it doesn't mean that we can immediately follow all of it. And nobody is expected to do this. What I do hope is that each one of us receives something precious from this and tries to bring this into your daily life. Okay? Like a guideline for our life. Guidelines. Let's stop here now for lunch. Let's make our dedications. Guru Amanda. Delex and Delec, Maguia, Delection, Intent, Delection, Concha, Chingilo, Concha, Sungilo, Drupso, Concha, Trash. At night, at dawn, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of life with many signs of auspiciousness. Sem Chö Sutra, Chö Lam Sutra, Lam La Parchin, Yawaramash. May the mind become Dharma. May Dharma become the path. And may the path be free from interferences. Have a good lunch.